Dave Ramsey has some very dangerous advice out there, and we need to talk about it today. No, let's cut the music short. We can jam out to the full song on next week's episode. Please follow or subscribe if you don't want to miss it. But today, we need to take the entirety of the episode talking about the most dangerous advice that Dave Ramsey gives. In the last couple episodes, we've been primarily covering retirement. And in the last episode, we talked about a safe withdrawal rate study that I conducted. I conducted this study not only to understand the risks when it comes to retirement strategies for myself, but also for my clients and all of you who are listening. There are a lot of opinions on what safe withdrawal rate is actually safe in retirement, and it's a topic that is too important for us to take anyone's word at face value. We need to understand the risks that are involved when it comes to managing our portfolio in retirement. And we need to understand how much money we need to retire in the first place. I like to begin with the end in mind. If I know how much I need to pull out each year, and I know what's safe in order to get the retirement that I'm dreaming of, well, then I can do the math to figure out how much I need as a lump sum in my nest egg to engage with that retirement. And from there, I can figure out how much I need to be investing every year in my given portfolio in order to achieve that goal by the age in which I want to retire. Now, I said there were a lot of voices out there that had various opinions on what safe withdrawal rate is actually safe. And Dave Ramsey is one of the most prominent voices. And this advice that Dave gives on safe withdrawal rates is so dangerous, I don't want you to take just my word for it. I want to share with you some clips that I've put together from Dave Ramsey's show from just a couple months ago all the way back to 4 years. We're going to go from oldest to newest. And I want you to listen to these clips, listen to the advice that he's giving. I want you to figure out what safe withdrawal rate he believes is safe, and I want you to try to understand why. Now, as we get into these clips here, I want you to know that Amanda and I have edited them down for brevity to respect your time. But I'm not taking Dave out of context here. Down in the description, I have all of the original material linked.
All right, James is with us in Ocala, Florida. Hi, James. Welcome to the Dave Ramsey Show.
My plan is to retire at 66. Mm-hmm. I will turn 66 in 1 year. I have $645,000, and I'm just scared if I'm going to be able to retire with the little amount of money that I have.
Mm-hmm. Before Dave answers here, he has $645,000. That's what he has for retirement. I may have clipped it out, but he's retiring in 1 year, and he's scared if that's enough. He needs to understand what the risks are for his withdrawal strategy in retirement in order to achieve financial peace in retirement.
$600,000. I mean, that's a lot of money. You did good.
645.
I know. That's good. Very good. And you're going to have more by the time you retire. And then I've got two goals for your retirement. One is for you to have a nest egg enough that you can live off of the income it creates without touching the principal. And the other one is to get a house paid off.
I clipped it out, but this individual who's asking the question here still has a mortgage, and he's getting very close to retirement. I firmly advocate that you get your mortgage paid off before you retire. But let's not get distracted.
Here's your formula, real rough and dirty, okay? The stock market has averaged, if you're invested in good mutual funds that are averaging what the stock market has averaged between 11 and 12%, okay? If you pull off 7 or 8% off your nest egg, you're safe. I'm good with that.
Really? That much?
Yeah, if you're earning 11 or 12 and you're pulling off 8, you're leaving 3 or 4 in there.
Before we move on to the next clip, did you catch the safe withdrawal rate? 7 to 8 is what he cited for this individual at 66. Now, this next clip is from 2020, after the plague.
You made 10% on your money at $3 million. What is that? That's $300,000 a year. Mm-hmm.
Did you hear that? I miss Chris Hogan's voice.
You could pull $300,000 a year off and not touch the $3 million, just the golden eggs, but don't touch the goose. If you pulled off 8%, that'd be $240,000. So as long as you think you can live on that, then $3 million will be enough.
Now, this is a different clip where, again, $3 million is brought into question. This one's from 2021.
I have about $3 million, and I'm curious if that's enough to comfortably retire.
Well, it should be. It's a lot of money. Well done. So if it were me, I would have put that in good growth stock mutual funds, making 11 or 12% and lived off of about 10 or less.
There it is again, 10 or less.
Which means I would have somewhere around $250,000, $300,000 a year to live on. I think I could struggle through. And the money would never, the principal would never deplete substantially during that time, and I could do that in perpetuation.
Now this clip here is the one that I've edited the least. Pay extra close attention to this clip. We're going to talk about this one the most.
My wife is 70. We're both in good health. We have a combined retirement and Social Security income of about $140,000 a year. We own our home outright and have no debt. We have about $100,000 in Roth and $1 million in traditional IRAs. Our wonderful, I know.
Way to go, Steve.
Our wonderful financial advisor is recommending a distribution of no more than 4%. We're looking at about 5% to enable us to travel while we're able to. What is your recommendation on the maximum annual distribution?
So if the money is invested in good mutual funds and it's making, average market returns of 11%, 12%, why can you only take out 4%?
It's a good question.
Just fear, I think, is the main reason people do it.
No, not just fear.
Financial advisors say that.
He gets more money? Is that how that works?
Possibly. Or possibly he is a financial planning lemming. You know what a lemming is?
That's an old school word.
These are small rats that run in herds and follow each other over cliffs.
That is the funniest way I've heard to describe financial advisors.
And so, meaning you go along with the crowd. You go along with the crowd. You go along with the crowd. And you don't even ask why. You just go along with the crowd. And so you don't want to be sheeple. So here's the thing. That is a standard thing in financial planning, 4%. Because after inflation and after poor rates of return on the portfolio, you're still going to be okay at 4%. But by God, 5%, you're going to sink it.
Now, I want to call out here, Dave is talking about the 4% rule being, quote unquote, safe in the financial advisor's eyes, but then 5%, you're going to sink the ship. This is somewhat denying the fact that there must be a line between a safe withdrawal rate and one that isn't exposing you to too much undue risk. Dave doesn't want to believe that line can exist between 4 and 5%.
Which is completely asinine. That's just ridiculous.
They're going ultra conservative
obviously,
here.
Steve, you are smarter than your financial advisor because you have more money than he does. And you've done a better job than he has. So you can kind of tell him what to do with your money. Be real comfortable doing that.
This somewhat contradicts Dave's general demeanor when it comes to financial advisors. He always tells you that you need to go get a financial advisor in order to help you manage your investments and your retirement. But here he calls out standard financial advisor practice, standard is what he referred to it as being stupid. And he says, just tell the financial advisor what to do with your money. I don't understand why, if that is his position on safe withdrawal rates, why he would recommend you go to a financial advisor as opposed to DIYing things if you're quote unquote smarter than the advisor.
And dude, if you want to pull out 6%, it's okay with me. I think you're going to be okay. If you want to pull out 10%, you're not going to destroy the portfolio because
10% again.
Dude, you're 70. What are you going to live to? 170? You're not going to wind this thing down in 25 years. You're not going to tear the principal up in 25 years even doing that.
10%, in Dave's words there, should last you 25 years without destroying the principal of your nest egg.
I would suggest 5, maybe 6% drawdown on this if you've got it invested in good mutual funds that are giving you market rates of return.
I have $1.4 million in the bank and want to know how much is enough for me to feel comfortable retiring. $1.4 million sounds like a lot, but I don't have a good handle on how long that would last.
And that's why this topic is very important. Many of us don't have a good handle on how long a nest egg will last, and we don't understand just how sensitive the survival of our portfolio can be when we're talking about safe withdrawal rates and strategies.
And I feel like it's more about being able to and being happy with living off the interest. So if you looked at 1.4 million and it's invested, let's say that you're averaging a 10% rate of return, are you able to live on the 10% comfortably with inflation,
Here, Jade, the Ramsey personality, doesn't even do the formula that we've heard Dave mention, where you take the growth of the portfolio, the average growth, subtract inflation, and then live off the remaining. That seems to be the formula. And here, Jade just says, if you have a portfolio that averages 10%, why can't you just live on 10%? Remember that.
All of your expenses, so in his case, $140,000 a year. Does that feel right? If you feel like yes, then great.
It'll last forever.
It'll last forever because you're never touching the principal.
And again, there's a claim here from this clip that I think is only 2 months old at the time that I'm recording, that a 10% withdrawal rate should last you into perpetuity.
Yeah, it'll keep laying the golden eggs.
That's right. And that's really where you want to be. You don't ever want to have to touch that money.
Yeah, and here's a simple equation, and it is probably overly simple, but just to kind of give you an idea.
Maybe overly simple? I think it is overly simple.
Yeah. All right. Inflation, not counting lately, or counting lately actually, for the last 75 years has averaged 4%, 4.2%. All right. Now, the average stock market rate of return is 11.8 since the stock market began. That's the average annual return if you had invested in growth stock mutual funds across the stock market, okay? Now, so if we just use rough numbers, let's say 12% rate of return, which my personal mutual funds have averaged that for decades now, so averaged.
I'm going to call out, just because a portfolio that you have has done well doesn't mean other people's will match. That, I believe, falls under survivorship bias.
Some years not, some years a lot more. Average.
That's right.
Remember sixth grade math.
Can you explain
average?
Because I know all the time people fight us on that. The difference between annual or like annualized rate of return, looking at it over the track record of it.
Now, Jade brings up an interesting point here. People do criticize Dave for taking a simple average in order to figure out what the stock market is going to make, as opposed to an annualized average, or as some of the math nerds call it, a geometric average. We're going to talk about that in a little bit.
Just look at and say, what did you make? Okay, because this is how wealthy people look at it. They go, all right, if I'm making 12 and I'm losing 4 in purchasing power because of inflation. So if you got $1 million and you pull off 8, that's 80,000. That means you made 120, so your million grew by 40,000, and you lived on the 80. Then, so if you can live off of 8% and you're invested in good mutual funds, you probably pretty much do it in perpetuation.
All right, those are all the clips that I wanted to share with you for this episode. Here are the main takeaways that I noticed. One is a principle that I agree with. You want to live off of the interest that is generated from your portfolio without really tearing into the principal, i.e. live off of the eggs that the goose is laying and don't kill the golden goose. We don't want to eat up at the lump sum of money that is churning out the income. If we take too much money out too fast, then we're going to do just that. We're going to set us up where what we need to live off of is not sustainable by the nest egg. Takeaway number 2, Dave cites somewhere between 8 to 10% as being the maximum safe withdrawal rate that can last you into perpetuity. And he gets this by first saying you have to be invested in growth stock mutual funds. Most financial advisors are going to tell you that portfolio mix is too aggressive to have in retirement. And I believe my study reflects this understanding that they have. So Dave says that his portfolio has earned somewhere between 11 and 12%. In Dave's formula, you take the growth, subtract 3 or 4% for inflation, and that gets you 8% to withdraw. I don't know where he's getting the 10%, if he's just rounding it up and following that same fallacy where he knows the line exists, but if 4% is safe, then surely 5% is safe. And I think that kind of logic has taken him from, well, 8% is safe, and letting it creep up to being 10%. That must be safe too. And safe to the point that it is good for perpetuity, a perpetual safe withdrawal rate. And I don't think that's true. Now, I want to go back to the clip where George and Dave were discussing the matter, and he said that the 4% rule is the rule of thumb in the financial advisor world because it makes the financial advisor rich. There are financial advisors out there who are fiduciaries. Now, fiduciaries have a sworn promise to do what is best for their client. And I know that fiduciaries out there are going to recommend a safe withdrawal rate for clients that is around 4%, give or take. they're going to recommend something that is significantly more conservative than 8 to 10%. And to say, oh, it is what's going to make them rich is, in my opinion, an insult to the financial advising industry. Now, in that same clip, Dave mentioned that the 4% rule is just something that everyone does. It is to run with the crowd if you're going to use a conservative safe withdrawal rate. And he claimed that the 4% is just something that's been around. And he gave somewhat of an origin for it that doesn't really give the full story. The 4% rule comes from a study that came out of Trinity University. This particular study is known as the Trinity study. The results were so significant that the university became known for it. And I don't want you to just take my word for it when it comes to the importance of the Trinity study and where the 4% rule comes from, or the fact that safe withdrawal rates, good safe withdrawal rates, are closer to 4% than they are 8 to 10. And for that reason, we're going to shift over to one clip from the Money Guys show. Now, the Money Guys know the 4% rule well, and I couldn't say this part better myself.
So since we're kind of on this idea of early retirement, this next question from Robert's a great one. He said, is the 4% withdrawal rate still valid, or should I be more conservative? I think first we ought to probably define what is the 4% withdrawal rate. When somebody throws that out there, what does that mean?
When you see 4% safe withdrawal rate, what has been around forever is the Trinity study. Mm-hmm. And what this basically said that if you're 65 years of age, normal retirement, they calculated out that this study was that 4%, pretty much as long as you weren't pulling more than 4% of your principal asset value, you could make it through about anything over a normal 30-year retirement plan.
Now, that's important. The Trinity study did indeed limit itself to a normal 30-year retirement plan. They also considered portfolios that were diversified between stock and bond funds.
I know if you're under 50 years of age and you're planning on retiring early, you better be using a very conservative safe withdrawal rate. Give them some of the bands we use.
Yeah, some 3.5% if you're going to be in your 40s, certainly in the 3% range. In your 50s, maybe 3.5%. Late 50s, early 60s, we like 4%.
You see there, they talk about a more conservative safe withdrawal rate when you're extra young and you have a very long retirement time horizon going on in front of you. But when you're closer to normal, it's 4%. And we're going to find out that if you retire later than normal,
5 and out around that area, you can actually go to 5%. But here's what I think is beautiful. Like the withdrawal rate percentage is fantastic when you are far away from retirement to give you an idea. And your specific retirement scenario should not be boiled down to a simple, oh, I got enough for a 4% withdrawal rate. It should be way more customized than that, and you ought to have stress tested it, running it through Monte Carlo simulations.
So they mentioned that the safe withdrawal rate is good when you're far away from retirement. Just a simple 4% rule, or say if you're trying to retire really early using 3%, according to the Money Guys, and if you want to retire later in life, say maybe 5%. But they give these numbers in a way to help you plan for how much you need, planning with the end in mind. Here they're going to talk about what to do when you're getting close to actually retiring. They're going to mention just how sensitive things are and how important it is for you to really understand the risks involved for your given strategy that is specific to you.
The withdrawal rate gives you an idea of the number you should shoot for that age at which you want to hit it. But as you get closer and closer to that age, instead of like throwing grenades at that number, you got to get laser precise with what that number is.
Yeah, I look at a safe withdrawal rate as good napkin planning.
Yep.
Meaning that if you're in your 20s, 30s, even 40s, if you're doing traditional retirement dates, there's nothing wrong with using a safe withdrawal rate. But I do think as you quickly approach within the decade of retirement, guys, you better tighten it up because, I tell you all the time, it is a measure twice, cut once.
Measure twice, cut once indeed. That particular clip, in my opinion, highlights the importance of why safe withdrawal rates and retirement strategies are important for any of us to understand today, whether you're getting ready to retire or if retirement is so far away you can't even imagine it. But let's get back on track here. They mentioned 3 to 5% for safe withdrawal rates. They didn't mention anything remotely close to 8 to 10%. And these are CPAs. These are financial advisors. These are people who are actually dealing with clients' retirement portfolios, something that Dave Ramsey is not doing. I want to share with you now an example that I put together to explain sequence risk. Recall Dave says you can take your average growth for an aggressive portfolio, subtract average inflation, and get a safe withdrawal rate. Sequence risk says that because the market goes up and down, you can't just take averages like that. When you retire, when you start, your withdrawal strategy is going to change how much you end with. You could have the same two people who have the same withdrawal strategy and they retire at different times, or they take withdrawal distributions at different times in the month, and they're going to end up with completely different ending nest egg values, even though they started with the same amount of money. So let me explain what you can see here. At the top, I have the years 2002 to 2022. You don't see 2002. You don't actually see half of the years here. I did it every other year. So 2002 is the base. You start with $1 million at 2002. Then I show 04, 06, 08, all the way up to 2022. The nest egg value is the running value that you actually have in your retirement accounts as you're withdrawing money according to the distributions on row 8. The market value is what the market would do with $1 million in 2002 if you weren't withdrawing from it. Think of it as the basis of what the market has done as opposed to what your actual balance is. The balance will be the blue line. The market's performance will actually be the orange line. Now, that's not the percentage of change. That's the running market value for starting with the $1 million. Don't forget that. Now, the distributions are going to be according to the 4% rule as dictated in the Trinity study. The Trinity study said you take 4% of your initial nest egg. In this case, it's going to be the $1 million. And then each year you withdraw money thereafter, you correct for inflation. So be it an average inflation number that you apply or following actual inflation, you increase your distribution amount. So you'll see that in my distribution row, the amount that is being withdrawn is ever increasing, but it's only increasing due to an average inflation rate. And that makes sense. What we want to do in this strategy is maintain a consistent buying power through all retirement. So we have everything explained except for the average growth. With Dave Ramsey, he said take a 6th grade simple average approach, the average that you're probably most familiar with. The annualized average that Jade brought up in the clips is the actual compound interest rate that gets you to an equivalent ending point. So if you were to average what the actual interest change was, what the actual change in the market was each year, given the same point, say December to December, and then again and again, you end up with a different number than the equivalent annualized rate of return. And you'll see here if you're watching the video on YouTube or Rumble, the average growth is 8.1% if you annualize the return. It's 10% if you take a simple average, and that's where Dave might be getting some of his numbers. I'm not exactly sure, but for the random time of 2002 to 2022, that's what we're looking at. Now, with the safe withdrawal rate of 4%, you'll see that your actual nest egg value continues to grow, and it grows from $1 million in 2002 all the way up to $2.24 million in 2022. Now, this is smoothing out the curve and taking the average. This is Dave Ramsey's simplified world where the market is churning out a consistent return for you every single year. That way, in the next iteration here, we can compare it to the real world market data that occurred between 2002 and 2022. You can see here that the market, the orange line, has actually gone up and down quite a bit. We notice a huge dip for 2008 during the housing crash. And the ups and downs, even though we have years that do really, really well between 2002 and 2022, the mere nature of there being volatility, of there being inconsistency, of there being a lacking of a smooth curve, even though the market still ends at the same point, we only have $2.1 million at the end of 20 years. This is $127,000, almost $128,000 less than the smoothed out curve. Let's next test drive a 6% safe withdrawal rate strategy and see how things change. If we look at a smoothed out curve at 6% withdrawal, we see that the actual nest egg value maintains almost a level flat $1 million all the way until an inflection point around 2018, and it starts to dip down. Smoothing out the curve and withdrawing 6% actually results in 2022 in just under $1 million, $997,000. If we look at the actual volatile chart, though, the volatility that realistically happened in that 20 years results in an ending nest egg value of $810,000. This is $186,000 less than the smoothed out simplified curve. It results in something that is more risky if we take Dave's simplified approach. Let's consider Dave's 8% now. Doing Dave's 8%, even with the smoothed out curve, with a realistic annualized return, you run out of money between 2020 and 2021. It's gone. In 2020, you were left with $54,000 and you spend it all following the distribution strategy here. Realistically, I know that if you saw your nest egg plummet below $500,000 or $250,000 here, you'd probably change things up a little bit, but it might be too late. If you have engaged in the first 5 years or so with a safe withdrawal rate that is exposing you to significantly undue risk, like 8% is here, there might not be recovering unless you go back to work. And if we consider the situation with the actual S&P 500 market data, you end up running out of money earlier. You end up running out of money around 2019. Actually, you don't even make it to 2019. You run out before 2019. And for kicks and giggles, I ran it at 10%. You run out of money with the smoothed curve in 2015, and without the smoothed curve, you run out somewhere in 2014 using actual market data. You cannot take an average for a portfolio, even a hypothetical average, smooth out the curve and say, I'll base my safe withdrawal rate after that. You need to take into account the fact that the market goes up and down. You don't get to control what the market does after you decide to retire. And it may be an undue burden on you to say, I need to wait until the market recovers so that I can retire at a good time. You won't even know if it's a good time when there's a rebound. It might be a little breather before the market dips again. There's no way to know our exposure to sequence risk other than running robust Monte Carlo simulations and back-checking it against historical data. And that's what I have tried to do in my study. I want us to look at the study results that I have now with fresh eyes, understanding the fact that a safe withdrawal rate of 8 to 10% is probably exposing us to undue sequence risk and undue risk on the whole. With that, I'm going to share one more spreadsheet, if you're watching the video, where I've sort of trimmed out some of my data. I've focused on the 20 and 30-year results for safe withdrawal rates ranging from 3% all the way up to 10%. And the risks that we're looking for here, if you didn't watch last week's episode, if you didn't listen to last week's episode, are the percentages that show how many times in the simulations that I ran, a portfolio successfully got you to the end of retirement. Basically, 100% is perfect, and 95% and above is probably got you covered. If the worst 5% of cases in a Monte Carlo simulation actually come to pass, we're probably looking at something where the U.S. economy is no longer in existence. So let's look at these numbers that we have here. If you use a 3% safe withdrawal rate, you're safe across the board at 20 years. At 30 years, you're safe. You're above 95% success rates on everything except using my 401k. Now, my 401k is comprised of growth stock mutual funds, the kinds of funds that Dave recommends that you go after, the ones that are more volatile than the S&P 500. The S&P 500 is what I used for the 100% stock index study results here. And you'll see, because the S&P 500 is less volatile, its survival rate at a 3% withdrawal rate, very conservative, is 97.4% as opposed to the growth stock mutual funds, which got 92.2%. Now, 92.2%, you might be willing to take on that risk in order to get the potential additional growth and have a bigger nest egg at the end. But let's not get hung up on that. Let's keep going. At a 4%, again, 4%, the golden 4%, 20 years, we're pretty much safe all the way across the board. It looks like 30 years at 3%, really. Almost a copy-paste down. At 4% for 30 years, though, a 100% bond index fund portfolio starts to fall apart. 20% of the time, it fails. The rest of them are looking pretty good until we get to the 100% stock index and the 401k again. The S&P 500 here falls short of a stock bond mix. The S&P 500 survives 89% of the time, and the growth stock mutual fund 401k 82.9% of the time. At 5%, we are relatively good at 20 years. It looks safe, not as safe as we did at 4%, until we get into the aggressive growth stock mutual funds. They're now 84.9% for a 20-year period. The 30-year period, though, the bonds fall to a 14% success rate. 80% bond, 20% stock, 68.4% successful. Here, the 50-50 stock bond mix starts to shine. It's the winner for 5% in my study at 80.3%. That's still not safe. You're still exposing yourself. Going from 4% to 5% for a 30-year retirement, you're exposing yourself to risk that did not exist. And I know that this is just a study. This does not constitute actual financial advice from a financial advisor. But in the confines of what I consider to be a realistic study, we can show that Dave is wrong when he says, oh, if 4% is safe, why isn't 5%? But let's go down to Dave Ramsey's 8% withdrawal. The S&P 500 actually does the best at 8%. It has a survival rate of 53.4% at 20 years. And the growth stock mutual fund still underperformed the S&P 500 in the Monte Carlo simulations that I ran. It hits 52.7%. It's close. It might as well be the same. But here at 20 years, at an 8% withdrawal rate, you are a coin flip away from running out of money. That's what I found here. That means that if Dave gives the advice that you can pull out money at 8% with growth stock mutual funds or any other portfolio mix here that is at least 20% stocks, if you pull money out with an 8% withdrawal rate, by 20 years, half of the people you gave that advice to are going to have run out of money if they follow it to a T. Half of them, instead of measuring twice, cutting once at the beginning, they are going to run with it, fall apart, and have to find some other method to make ends meet in the middle of retirement. And if we look at the 30-year results, they're worse. The best one is now the growth stock mutual funds, but it's only 36.2% successful. The bond, the 100% bond fund, nothing. Let's look at the 10% withdrawal rate now for 30 years. The growth stock mutual funds only make it 20% of the time. The S&P 500, 13.9. What we see here is massive undue risk. I mean, think about it here. 1 in 4 people are actually going to succeed at 10% if they invest aggressively and stick to this retirement strategy. And that's why Dave Ramsey's advice to pull out 8 to 10% as your safe withdrawal rate is so incredibly dangerous to you. It is a detriment to your retirement planning before and after you retire. Before you retire, you may very well not save up enough if you feel like you can pull out 10%. You don't need as big of a nest egg if you can pull out 10% and live off of that. And what we found here is that is incredibly risky. So if you run off of those numbers, you decide to retire earlier, or you decide not to save enough, you expose yourself to undue risk, serious undue risk. And if you hit retirement, you've done a good job saving your nest egg and you decide to engage with an 8 to 10% withdrawal rate, you're going to end up in the exact same bucket. You might end up running out of money. No, you are more than likely going to run out of money before your retirement ends. You are exposing yourself to undue risk that I get heartburn just thinking about. I can hardly breathe. And I don't think that Dave intends to give such dangerous advice on the radio. I know he loves and cares for his listeners. Dave Ramsey's advice when it comes to getting out of debt and pushing you to a plan that works with a proven track record, the 7 baby steps, that is beautiful work. He's been doing God's good work there. And in this particular front, I just don't think he's run the numbers or thought about the risk that is here. And if he's had critics who have brought this up to him, he must have ignored them. For 4 years worth of clips, we've seen him give the same consistent, ill-informed advice. Dave Ramsey and the entire team at Ramsey Solutions, I want you to know that I am making this episode and putting this out here because I care for you and your listeners. I also know that you all are people of faith, and I want to share a particular Bible verse with you, Proverbs 12:1. Proverbs 12:1 reads, "Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but he who hates correction is stupid." Mr. Ramsey and Ramsey Solutions, what I am providing you here in this episode of the HopeFilled Financial Podcast is evidence that you and your production, all that you do with Ramsey Solutions, has an element of dangerous advice that can be a serious detriment to those who follow you to a T or blindly follow the advice for retirement withdrawal strategies without doing any other due diligence to understand it. And that is not healthy or helpful. And you can't just say those who run calculators or follow the 4% rule or considering more conservative approach are lemmings who are going off the cliff. And you can't just call me names in order to disprove what I've put forward here. I have put forward evidence in good faith to help you. And an ad hominem attack is not going to change that. For Mr. Ramsey, I don't think that you should let your ego and not being able to admit if you've given wrong advice get in the way of providing a correction here. For those of you who are listening, I really want you to share this on all of the videos that are linked below in the description and any other Ramsey Solution content that talks about the safe withdrawal rate stuff. I need to get this episode in front of Ramsey Solutions and the team there so that they can make the correct and biblical steps of correcting the dangerous information that they have in their programs, in their content, in their classes, in their workshops. You cannot withdraw 8 to 10% in retirement and expect to make it. And that's why today's episode ended up skipping everything that I normally put in front of it. Next week, we're going to continue with the retirement theme. We're going to be talking about the difference between Roth investments and traditional investments. It's an important topic, even if it doesn't carry the emotional weight that this particular episode did. Until next week, until next Tuesday, budget bravely and enjoy your hope-filled financial future.